The kitchen timer beeped its shrill warning just as I pulled the casserole from the oven, the scent of baked chicken and herbs filling the air. I set it on the cooling rack, wiped my hands on my apron, and turned to check the salad I'd been assembling. Romaine lettuce, cherry tomatoes, cucumber slices, all arranged just the way David liked it. The countertop was a controlled chaos of meal preparation, mixing bowls, cutting boards, a pot of mashed potatoes still steaming on the stove. This was my Sunday routine now. Wake up early, prepare a feast for my son's family, clean up afterward, maybe steal a few moments with my grandson Ethan before the week began again. At 50, I'd grown accustomed to the rhythm of service, the quiet satisfaction of feeding the people I loved. From the living room, I could hear Ethan's delighted squeals as he played with his toy cars. The sound made me smile despite the exhaustion settling into my lower back. 4 years old and bursting with energy, he reminded me so much of David at that age, all curiosity and momentum, moving through the world like a small hurricane. I reached for the vinaigrette I'd made earlier when the squeal turned into something else, a crash, a thud, then silence. That terrible silence before the scream. When it came, Ethan's wail pierced through the house like a siren. My heart lurched. I dropped the salad tongs and rushed toward the living room, but Emily was faster. She burst from the hallway, her blonde hair flying behind her, and swept Ethan into her arms. Oh my God, she gasped, examining his forehead where a red bump was already beginning to swell. What happened? Where were you? The words hit me before I'd even entered the room. I stopped in the doorway, my hands still damp from washing vegetables, and took in the scene. Ethan sobbed against his mother's shoulder. The coffee table was askew. A toy car lay overturned on the hardwood floor. I was making lunch, I said quietly. He was playing right here. I could hear him. Emily's head snapped toward me, her eyes blazing. You were supposed to be watching him. I was in the kitchen. He was in the kitchen? Her voice rose, shrill and accusatory. You were cooking while my son was running around unsupervised. He could have been seriously hurt. Margaret? The use of my first name stung. In the 2 years since Emily had married David, she'd never quite settled on what to call me. Mom felt too intimate. Mrs. Collins, too formal. So Margaret it was, a name that created distance even as we lived under the same roof. Emily, he tripped on his toy. Children fall. I'm sorry he's hurt, but nothing. She clutched Ethan tighter, and he wailed louder, feeding off her panic. You should have been watching him. What if he'd hit his head on the corner of the table? What if it was worse? David appeared then, drawn by the commotion. He was still in his weekend clothes. Sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, his dark hair tousled from the nap he'd been taking upstairs. His eyes went first to Ethan, then to Emily, and finally to me. That look. I knew that look. It was the same expression he'd worn as a teenager when I'd disappointed him, when I'd forgotten to pick him up from practice because I'd been working a double shift at the hospital. When I'd missed his championship game because my car had broken down. That mixture of frustration and resignation, as if he'd expected better and was perpetually let down. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. David, tell your mother she can't just leave Ethan alone while she's busy doing other things, Emily demanded, rocking Ethan back and forth. The boy's sobs were subsiding into hiccups now, his face buried against her neck. My son crossed his arms, his jaw tight. Mom, you need to be more careful. 5 words. That was all it took to make my chest feel like it was caving in. I was being careful, I said, and I hated how small my voice sounded. I was in the next room, I could hear him playing. He's 4 years old, David. Sometimes children fall. Sometimes children fall because no one's watching them properly, Emily shot back. She stood now, still holding Ethan, and moved past me toward the kitchen. I'm getting ice for this bump. We should probably take him to urgent care. Make sure there's no concussion. David followed her, leaving me standing alone in the living room. I looked down at the toy car on the floor, a red plastic convertible no bigger than my palm. Such a small thing to cause so much upheaval. I bent down and picked it up, my knees protesting. When had I gotten so tired? The memories came then, unbidden. David at 3, learning to ride his tricycle and crashing into the fence, splitting his lip. I'd rushed him to the ER, held him while they cleaned the wound, sang to him until his tears dried. David at 6, falling off the monkey bars at school and breaking his wrist. I'd left work early, driven through rush hour traffic, sat with him through the x-rays and the casting. I'd been there for every fall, every fever, every nightmare. I'd been a single mother since David was 2, when his father decided family life wasn't for him and moved to California. For 18 years, it had been just the 2 of us. I'd worked double shifts as a nurse, sacrificed vacations and new clothes and sometimes even proper meals to make sure David had everything he needed. Music lessons, baseball equipment, college tuition. I'd been enough then. When had I stopped being enough? In the kitchen, Emily was wrapping ice in a dish towel, while David held Ethan, who had calmed considerably and was now more interested in the promise of a popsicle than his minor injury. The red bump on his forehead looked angry but not serious. I'd seen enough childhood accidents in my nursing career to know the difference. I should finish lunch, I said, moving toward the stove where the potatoes were starting to form a skin. I don't think anyone's hungry right now, Emily said sharply, not looking at me as she pressed the ice pack gently against Ethan's forehead. I'm hungry, Ethan announced, his crisis apparently forgotten. Grandma, are you making the chicken I like? Yes, sweetheart. With the crispy skin, just how you... Maybe Grandma should take a break from cooking today, Emily interrupted, her tone suggesting this wasn't really a suggestion at all. I stood there, spatula in hand, feeling like an intruder in a kitchen I'd been working in all morning. The casserole sat cooling on the counter, the salad half dressed, the table only partially set. Everything incomplete, like me. I'll just put things away then, I murmured. No one objected. I moved through the kitchen mechanically, covering dishes with foil, storing food in containers, wiping down surfaces I'd already cleaned twice. Emily took Ethan upstairs to change his clothes. David lingered, scrolling through his phone, his presence a silent accusation. David, I finally said, my back to him as I rinsed lettuce leaves in the sink. It was an accident. I know. He's fine. Kids are resilient. I know, Mom. Then why do I feel like I've committed some terrible crime? He was quiet for a long moment. I turned off the faucet and faced him, waiting. My son had always been careful with his words, thinking through everything before speaking. It was a trait I'd encouraged in him as a child, teaching him to consider consequences, to be thoughtful. Now it felt like a wall between us. It's not about the fall, he finally said, still not meeting my eyes. It's about... Emily's been stressed. The baby's been keeping her up at night with teething. Work's been demanding. She just needs to know Ethan's safe, that's all. And she thinks he's not safe with me. That's not what I said, but it's what she thinks. And maybe what you think too. His silence was answer enough. I dried my hands on a towel and hung it carefully on the oven door handle. I see. Mom, don't what? Don't notice that I'm not trusted in my own son's house? Don't feel hurt that my grandson's mother thinks I'm negligent? Don't wonder when I became such a burden? You're not a burden, but his voice lacked conviction, and we both knew it. I'd moved in with David and Emily 14 months ago, after my apartment building had been sold and converted into condos I couldn't afford. David had insisted, said it made sense that they had the room and I could help with Ethan. It had seemed like a good idea at the time, a chance to be close to my family, to be useful. But somewhere between then and now, useful had become intrusive. Help had become interference. Maybe I should look for my own place again, I said quietly. Mom, that's not necessary. Isn't it? Before he could answer, Emily came back downstairs, Ethan on her hip and a determined set to her jaw. She'd changed into fresh clothes, pulled her hair back, put on lipstick. Armor, I recognized. She was preparing for battle. David, we need to talk, she said, not quite looking at me. Privately. They disappeared into the den, closing the door behind them. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the lunch no one would eat, and felt something inside me begin to crack. Ethan had been left to play in the living room again, apparently trusting now that he'd be safe. I joined him, settling onto the couch as he zoomed his cars across the coffee table, making vrooming sounds and narrating elaborate crashes and rescues. He looked up at me and grinned, the bump on his forehead already less red, already becoming just another small battle scar from childhood. "Does it hurt, sweetheart?" I asked. He touched it experimentally. "A little, but I'm brave." "You are very brave." Mama was scared, though. Mamas worry. It's what we do. He considered this with the seriousness of a small philosopher. "Did you worry about Daddy when he was little?" "Every single day. Even when he fall down? Especially when he fell down?" He nodded sagely, satisfied with this answer, and returned to his cars. I watched him play, memorizing the curve of his cheek, the concentration in his eyes, the way his small hands gripped the toys. These were the moments I'd moved here for. These quiet afternoon scenes of ordinary childhood. The den door opened. Emily emerged first, her expression rigid and controlled. David followed, running his hand through his hair the way he always did when he was uncomfortable. "Margaret," Emily said, and the formality in her voice made my stomach drop. "Could you sit down? We need to discuss something." I was already sitting, but I understood this was about making me smaller, more manageable. I stayed where I was on the couch. Ethan, sensing the shift in atmosphere, grabbed his cars and scurried toward the playroom. Emily remained standing with David slightly behind her like a reluctant backup singer. "We've been talking," she began, "and we think it might be best if you found somewhere else to live." The words hung in the air between us. I'd expected them, but expecting a blow doesn't make it hurt less. "I see," I said calmly. "May I ask why?" Today's incident just highlighted what we've been feeling for a while. The house is crowded, and Ethan needs more attention than we can give him when we're also worrying about other things. Other things. Meaning me. "I watch Ethan, so you don't have to worry," I said, keeping my voice level. "I cook, I clean, I try to stay out of your way." "That's not the point," Emily said, her voice rising. "The point is, we need our space. We're a young family trying to establish ourselves, and having you here it's complicated." "Complicated," I repeated. The word tasted bitter. "I moved in because David said you needed help. Because you were overwhelmed with work and the baby. Because I could contribute to the household and spend time with my grandson." "And we appreciate that," David interjected weakly. "But maybe it's time to reassess the arrangement." I looked at my son, really looked at him. When had he become so afraid of disappointing his wife that he'd sacrifice his mother? Or had I raised him to value peace at any cost, even this one? "Reassess," I said softly. "That's an interesting word for kick your mother out." "That's not fair," Emily protested. "We're not kicking you out. We're suggesting that it might be healthier for everyone if you had your own place. You could visit whenever you want. You'd have your independence back." "My independence?" I almost laughed. "I gave up my apartment, my independence, to move here because my son asked me to, because I thought I was needed." "You are needed," David said, but he couldn't quite look at me when he said it. "Just maybe not living here. We can help you find a place. Help with the deposit. I don't need your money." The words came out sharper than I intended. "I've supported myself my entire life. I only moved here because you convinced me it was best for everyone." Emily crossed her arms. "Well, maybe we were wrong." The honesty of it was almost refreshing. At least she wasn't pretending anymore. I stood slowly, feeling every one of my 50 years in my bones. "You're right," I said, and watched surprise flicker across both their faces. This was a mistake. I should never have believed that I could be part of your life without being in your way. That's on me. "Mom," David started, but I held up my hand. I'll start looking for a place tomorrow. I'll be out of your house as soon as I can arrange it. I hope that gives you the peace and space you're looking for. I walked toward the stairs, headed for the guest room that had been mine for 14 months. Behind me, I heard Emily say something to David in a low voice, but I didn't turn around. Dignity, I'd learned over the years, sometimes meant knowing when to retreat. I was halfway up the stairs when the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," Emily called, probably grateful for the interruption. I continued to my room, but the sound of a familiar voice made me pause. "Well, hello, Emily. I was just stopping by to drop off those cookies I promised Margaret. Is she home?" Lisa, my neighbour from my old apartment building, the one person who'd stayed in touch after I moved. She'd been my friend for 20 years, had seen me through David's teenage rebellions, celebrated his college graduation, danced at his wedding. Lisa knew the real story, the one that wasn't being told in this house. "Oh, Lisa, this isn't really a good time," Emily was saying, but Lisa was already inside, her cheerful voice carrying up the stairs. "Nonsense! I've been meaning to visit for weeks. Margaret. Margaret, where are you? Hun?" I descended the stairs slowly. Lisa stood in the entryway, holding a tin of cookies and wearing her brightest smile, but I could see the sharp intelligence in her eyes. She'd clocked the tension immediately. Lisa always did. "There you are." She enveloped me in a quick hug, then held me at arm's length. "You look tired. Are they working you too hard?" She directed this last question at Emily with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We were just in the middle of a family discussion," Emily said tightly. "Oh, I won't stay long. Just wanted to drop these off and catch up with my dear friend. Margaret, why don't we have some tea? You know how I love your tea." Before anyone could object, Lisa had swept into the kitchen, making herself at home in the way that only old friends can. I followed helplessly, aware of David and Emily trailing behind us, unsure how to handle this intrusion. Lisa busied herself filling the kettle, pulling mugs from the cabinet as if she'd lived here for years. "So," she said brightly, "what's new with the Collins family? I feel like I haven't seen you all together in ages." The silence was painful. Lisa turned, leaning against the counter with her arms crossed, her expression shifting from cheerful to serious. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Emily said quickly. "Just family stuff. Like I said, this isn't really a good time." "Family stuff?" Lisa's eyes moved from Emily to David to me, and I watched understanding dawn on her face. "I see. What kind of family stuff sends Margaret up the stairs looking like her heart's been broken?" "Lisa, it's fine," I said quietly. "They just need their space. I'm going to look for my own place." "Your own place? You just moved here last year." 14 months ago, Emily corrected. "And we've decided it's not working out." Lisa's eyes narrowed. "Not working out for whom exactly?" "That's really none of your business," Emily said, her voice hardening. "Margaret is my business. She's been my friend for 2 decades. I've known David since he was in diapers. So forgive me if I'm concerned when I show up and find out you're essentially evicting a woman who's done nothing but support this family." "We're not evicting anyone," David protested. "We're just saying it might be better if Mom lived somewhere else." "Better for you, you mean?" Lisa's voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. "Let me guess. Something happened today. Something small and meaningless. And suddenly, Margaret's the problem?" Ethan chose that moment to wander back into the kitchen, probably drawn by the raised voices. He still held his toy car, and his forehead still bore that red bump. Lisa's eyes zeroed in on it immediately. "Oh no, did you have an accident, sweet boy?" "I falled," Ethan announced proudly. "But I'm okay. Grandma said Mama's worry." "Grandma was right." Lisa picked him up, examined the bump with practiced care. "Looks like you'll survive. You're a tough kid." She set him back down and turned to Emily. "Is this what started all this? A bump on the head?" "He could have been seriously hurt," Emily said defensively. "Kids get bumps and bruises. It's called childhood. I assume Margaret was watching him." "She was in the kitchen," Emily said, as if this were a confession of criminal negligence. Lisa actually laughed, a sharp bark of disbelief. The kitchen. You mean the room directly adjacent to where he was playing? The room where she was preparing a meal for your entire family, from the looks of things? She gestured at the covered dishes still on the counter. Are you serious right now? It's not just about today, David said, jumping to his wife's defense. It's been building for a while. The living situation is stressful. Stressful for Margaret, I'm sure, living with people who don't appreciate her. But I'm guessing that's not the stress you mean. Lisa, please, I said quietly. This isn't helping, isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, these two need to hear some hard truths. She turned back to David and Emily. Do you know what Margaret gave up to move here? She had a beautiful apartment, rent-controlled, in a building where everyone knew her name. She gave it up because you called her David, crying about how overwhelmed you were with a new baby and Emily's demanding job. You begged her to move in, to help with childcare, to be there for your family. That's not... David started, but Lisa rolled right over him. And Margaret, being Margaret, said yes immediately. She packed up her entire life, left behind her friends and her community to come here and be your live-in babysitter and housekeeper. And now, the first time something doesn't go perfectly, you're throwing her out. We're not throwing her out, Emily insisted. We're suggesting she might be happier with her own space. Oh, stop it with the therapeutic language. You're kicking her out because you want your house to yourselves, and you don't want to feel guilty about it. At least have the courage to be honest. Emily's face flushed red. How dare you come into my house and what? Tell you you're making a mistake. Point out that you're treating your mother-in-law like an inconvenient piece of furniture. Yeah, I dare. Because someone needs to, and clearly your husband doesn't have the spine. David's face went pale, then red. You need to leave. Oh, I'll leave. But first, let me say this. Lisa stepped closer to David, her voice dropping but losing none of its intensity. I watched your mother raise you. I watched her work herself to exhaustion to give you every opportunity. I watched her cry when she couldn't afford to send you to that music camp you wanted. I watched her take out loans she's probably still paying off to cover your college expenses. And now I'm watching you choose your wife's convenience over your mother's well-being, and it makes me sick. That's not fair, David said, but his voice wavered. What's not fair is expecting Margaret to sacrifice everything and then acting like she's the burden. She deserves better than this. Better than both of you. Emily moved toward the door, opening it in a clear dismissal. I think you should go now. Lisa looked at me, her eyes softer. Come with me. Come stay at my place while you figure things out. You don't have to spend another night here being made to feel small. For a moment I was tempted, but I shook my head. I'll be fine, Lisa. Thank you for the cookies, and for this. This is bullshit, and you know it. But she squeezed my hand and moved toward the door. Before she left, she turned back to David and Emily. When she's gone, when you have all the space and independence you want, I hope you think about this moment. I hope you remember what you chose, because one day you're going to need her, and she might not be there anymore. The door closed behind her with a sharp click that seemed to echo through the whole house. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ethan had retreated to the playroom again, wise enough at 4 to sense when adults needed space. The three of us stood in the kitchen, the aftermath of Lisa's truth-telling hanging in the air like smoke. That was completely inappropriate, Emily finally said, her voice shaking. Was it? I asked quietly. Or was it just uncomfortable to hear? Mom, Lisa shouldn't have... Lisa is one of the few people in my life who tells me the truth, I interrupted. Even when it's hard to hear. Especially then. You could learn something from that, David. He flinched. Good. I moved past them both, headed back toward the stairs. I'll start packing tonight. I should be able to be out within a week, 2 at most. I'll need some time to find a place and arrange movers. You don't have to rush, David said weakly. I stopped, turned to face him fully. Yes, David, I do. Because every day I stay here now, I'll know I'm unwanted. I'll know that every meal I cook, every time I play with Ethan, every moment I exist in this space, I'm somehow in your way. And I won't live like that. I didn't raise you to make me feel that way, but here we are. Mom, do you remember? I said, my voice steady despite the tears I could feel building. When you were 8, and you broke your arm falling out of that tree in the backyard? The one I told you not to climb? He nodded slowly. I took you to the ER, and we waited for 5 hours because it was a Saturday night, and the place was packed with people who needed help more urgently. You were in pain and I couldn't fix it, and you looked at me like I could fix anything in the world if I just tried hard enough. That's how children see their mothers. Like we have magic powers. I remember, he whispered. And do you remember what you said to me when they finally took you back for x-rays? When the nurse asked who would be staying with you? He shook his head. You said, my mom. My mom stays with me. She always stays. I felt the first tear slip down my cheek and didn't bother wiping it away. I did stay, David. Through everything. Through your father leaving. Through the teenage years when you hated me for having rules. Through college when you barely called. Through your wedding when I smiled and told everyone how happy I was, even though I knew Emily would never quite accept me. I stayed because that's what mothers do. This isn't the same thing, he said, but he couldn't look at me. Isn't it? You're choosing to let me go. You're deciding I'm too much trouble, too much in the way. You're breaking something between us, David, and I don't know if it can be fixed. Emily stepped forward, her face still flushed but her voice controlled. Margaret, you're being dramatic. This isn't about not loving you. It's about what's practical for our family right now. I turned to her, and I saw her really clearly for the first time, young, ambitious, determined to build the perfect life on her own terms. I'd been young once too, though it felt like a lifetime ago, but I'd never been cruel about it. Emily, I said gently, someday you'll be 50. Someday Ethan will be grown with a family of his own. And maybe, if you're lucky, he'll invite you to be part of their lives. I hope when that happens, he treats you better than you're treating me now. I hope his spouse sees your value even when you're tired and scared and just trying to help. I hope they remember that family isn't about convenience. She opened her mouth, closed it again. For just a moment, I saw uncertainty flicker across her face. I didn't wait for a response. I climbed the stairs to my room and closed the door softly behind me. From the window, I could see the street where Lisa's car was still parked, and I knew she was sitting there, waiting to make sure I was okay. That's what friendship looked like. That's what loyalty looked like. I pulled my suitcases from the closet and began to pack. The week that followed was one of the strangest of my life. I moved through the house like a ghost, present but not quite there. I continued cooking meals but only for Ethan and myself. I continued cleaning but only the spaces I used. David and Emily gave me a wide berth, their conversations stopping when I entered a room, their eyes skittering away from mine. Ethan was the only one who acted normal. He didn't understand why Grandma was packing boxes, but he helped anyway, handing me books and asking questions about where I was going. "Will you have a house with a backyard?" he asked, sitting cross-legged on my bedroom floor. "Maybe an apartment with a small patio. Can I visit? Any time you want, sweetheart. Will you make cookies there?" "Absolutely." He seemed satisfied with this, returning to the toy car he'd brought with him, the same red convertible he'd been playing with when he fell. I'd found an apartment by Wednesday. Nothing fancy, but it was in a building with an elevator and a community garden. Close enough to David's house that I could visit, but far enough that I wouldn't be accidentally running into them at the grocery store. Lisa helped me sign the lease and lined up movers for the weekend. Friday evening, I was taping up the last of my boxes when Emily knocked on my door. She stood in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself, looking younger than her 26 years. "Can I come in?" I nodded, sitting on the edge of the bed. She remained standing, looking around at the nearly empty room. "I wanted to talk to you before you left," she said finally. To explain. You don't owe me an explanation, Emily. You've made your position clear. I don't think I have. She took a breath. When David and I got married, I had this vision of what our life would be like. Us and Ethan in this house, building our family, making our own traditions. And then you moved in, and suddenly there was someone else's way of doing things, someone else's voice in every decision. I tried to stay out of your way. I know. That's what made it harder. You were trying so hard to be helpful, and I felt guilty for resenting it. But I did resent it. Every time you cooked dinner, I felt like you were saying I couldn't take care of my own family. Every time you played with Ethan, I felt like you were a better mother than me. Every time David smiled at you, I felt like I was competing with a ghost. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the insecurity beneath the anger. Emily, I was never trying to replace you. I know that intellectually, but feelings aren't intellectual. And when Ethan fell, when you weren't right there, I had this moment of, I don't know, vindication. Like finally there was proof that I was right to want you gone. And I jumped on it. I know that's awful. Lisa was right about a lot of things. Lisa usually is. I'm not apologizing, she said quickly. I still think we need our space. But I wanted you to know it wasn't about you being a bad grandmother or a bad person. It was about me being scared and selfish, I guess. Honesty is something, I said quietly. It's more than your husband has given me. She winced. David loves you. He's just bad at standing up to me. That's not something to brag about, Emily. I know. She moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Ethan adores you. And, despite everything, I do think you've been good for him. I just wish I could have been bigger about sharing him. After she left, I sat in the gathering darkness, thinking about all the ways we hurt each other, intentionally and not. Emily was young and frightened of becoming invisible in her own life. I understood that. I'd been there once when David's father had treated me like background noise in his own story. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. Saturday morning arrived with grey skies threatening rain. The movers came early, efficiently loading boxes and furniture into their truck while David hovered anxiously and Emily kept Ethan occupied in the backyard. By noon, most of my things were gone, leaving behind ghost marks on the carpet and bare spots on the walls. I stood in the empty guest room, remembering the 14 months I'd lived here. It hadn't been all bad. There'd been good mornings with Ethan, quiet cups of coffee before the house woke up, the satisfaction of a clean kitchen after a good meal. But it had never quite felt like home. I saw that now. David found me there, his hands shoved in his pockets, his expression miserable. I'm sorry, Mom. Are you? Or are you just sorry that it's uncomfortable? He flinched. Both, probably. I know I should have handled this better. Should have stood up for you more. You just chose your wife over your mother. That's what you're supposed to do, David. I raised you to put your marriage first. I just wish you'd done it with a little more grace. Will you forgive me? I studied my son's face, seeing the little boy and the man all at once. Eventually, probably. But not today. Today I'm too hurt and too tired to offer forgiveness. Today I just need to leave. He nodded, his eyes wet. Will you still visit? Will you still see Ethan? Of course, he's my grandson. Nothing changes that. And me? You're still my son. But David, things are different now. You've made sure of that. I walked past him down the stairs one last time. Lisa was waiting by her car, ready to follow me to my new apartment. Ethan burst through the back door and wrapped himself around my legs. Bye, Grandma. Don't forget about the cookies. Never. I kissed the top of his head, breathing in the scent of his shampoo and grass and childhood. I'll call you this week. We'll set up a play date. Emily appeared in the doorway, gave me an awkward wave. David stood on the porch, his hands still in his pockets, watching me load my last bag into my car. I pulled out of the driveway slowly, watching the house shrink in my rearview mirror. David lifted one hand in a wave. I didn't wave back. Lisa followed me to the new apartment, helped me direct the movers, stayed to help me unpack the essentials. As evening fell, we sat on my new couch, the same one from my old apartment, before I'd given it up to move in with David, and drank wine from paper cups because I hadn't unpacked the glasses yet. "How are you holding up?" Lisa asked. "I'm angry," I admitted, "and hurt, and relieved, which makes me feel guilty." "Don't feel guilty for being relieved. That house was suffocating you." "But it's my son's house. My grandson lives there. And you'll still see them. On your terms now, not theirs." I looked around the small apartment, at the boxes still waiting to be unpacked, at the empty walls that would soon hold my photographs and paintings, at the patio visible through the sliding glass door where I could already imagine planting herbs in pots. "You know what the strange thing is?" I said. "I feel lighter, like I've been carrying something heavy for so long that I forgot it was there, and now it's gone." "The weight of gratitude," Lisa said. "That's what you've been carrying. The weight of needing to be grateful that they let you stay, grateful for every moment with Ethan, grateful to not be alone. Fuck that. You don't have to be grateful for the bare minimum. When did you get so wise? I've always been this wise. You just needed to be ready to hear it." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky darken outside. My phone buzzed. A text from David. "Let me know when you're settled. Love you." I put the phone down without responding. I'd answer tomorrow or the next day. Tonight was about reclaiming something I'd lost without realizing it. My peace, my dignity, my sense of self. In the morning I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. I lay there, listening to the sounds of my new building, my new neighbors, my new life. No one needed me to cook breakfast. No one was waiting for me to clean up their messes. No one was judging whether I was helpful enough, or invisible enough, or grateful enough. I was just Margaret Collins, 50 years old, a nurse with 40 years of experience, a mother, a grandmother, a friend. That was enough. It had always been enough. I got up, made coffee in my new kitchen, and called Ethan. He answered on the second ring, his voice high and excited, telling me about the butterfly he'd seen in the backyard and the new trick he'd taught himself with his toy cars. We made plans for him to visit the following weekend, just the two of us. When David got on the phone, his voice was cautious. "How's the new place?" "Good," I said honestly. "It's good, David." I meant what I said about being sorry. I know you did. Will we be okay, eventually? I looked out my patio door at the small garden space, already planning what I'd plant. Tomatoes, maybe. Basil. Something that would grow and flourish and feed me. "Yes," I said finally. "We'll be okay, just give me time." "I can do that." After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen, my coffee warm in my hands, and felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. Hope. Not for reconciliation exactly, though that might come. Not for things to go back to how they were, because they never would. But hope for this next chapter, this new beginning, this life I was building on my own terms. I'd spent so many years being what other people needed. Wife, mother, caretaker, grandmother. I'd shaped myself around other people's needs until I'd almost forgotten I had my own. Not anymore. Now I was going to build something just for me. Something that couldn't be taken away or diminished or dismissed. A life where my value wasn't measured by how useful I was to someone else. The doorbell rang. Lisa, with more boxes and take-out Chinese food. "Ready to make this place yours?" she asked, grinning. "More than ready." We spent the day unpacking, arranging furniture, hanging pictures. Lisa told terrible jokes and offered even worse decorating advice and made me laugh until my sides hurt. By evening, the apartment looked like a home. My home. That night, I sat on my patio with a glass of wine and watched the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere across town, David was putting Ethan to bed. Somewhere, Emily was probably feeling a mixture of relief and guilt. Somewhere life was going on without me at the center of it, and I was okay with that. Because here, in this small apartment with my boxes and my memories and my future, I was at the center of my own life, finally. And that, I realized, was worth everything.